everybody, and welcome. I'm Karen Panetta, and I'm honored to be the IEEE Awards Board Chair. And joining me here today is the 2022 IEEE Alexander Graham Bell Medal recipient, Dr. Kumar. And congratulations, Dr. Kumar. And also with us today is our esteemed sponsors from Nokia, Bell Labs, and we want to welcome them all. So first, we're going to congratulate you, Dr. Kumar, and then I'm going to have our esteemed guests introduce themselves, and then we'll start our discussion. This is just a discussion among friends. So, and those of you watching at home or wherever you are, feel free to put some questions in the chats if you want to ask Dr. Kumar a question as well. So let's get going. So let's start with our Nokia team.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marina. I manage the Bell Labs Awards programs, as well as we sponsor the external awards like the IEEE Graham Bell Medal. And we're very happy to have Dr. Kumar here today. Congratulations, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Harish Viswanathan. I'm the head of Radio Systems Research Lab at Nokia Bell Labs. We work on the mobile cellular systems, the transceivers and the physical layer and the medium access layer and resource allocation problems. I'm very happy to be here to congratulate Professor Kumar. His work is very well known, as most of you probably know. And in particular, I'm really proud because I also come from the Indian Institute of Technology at Madras, from which Professor Kumar also graduated. So congrats again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Iraj Sani. I head up the Mathematics and Algorithms group here at Bell Labs in Nokia. We work on a variety of problems across the spectrum of communication challenges, but more importantly, with regard to today's awardee, you've been the beneficiary of Professor Kumar's books, articles, as well as students who have worked in my team. So congratulations, Professor Kumar. It's a great honor to have you as an Alexander Graham Bell awardee.
Thank you very much.
Right. I'm Carl Nuzman. I work in Iraj's group here at Bell Labs in Math and Algorithms. I've had also the privilege of working with your students and benefiting from your work over the years and learning a lot from it. And excited to give my congratulations as well.
Thank you.
Nope, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Hi, sorry. Hi, I'm Jin Fangdu. Currently, I'm leading the radio system research team in Marriott. My own background is in information theory, and I benefit a lot by reading the papers when I was a student. And Professor Kumar's seminal paper on that, the scaling law of the wireless networks is really inspiring. It's impacted my own work, and myself managed to publish a couple of conference papers using the exact tools Dr. Kumar developed. And I really wish ours, I think the generation like me, and we could have a similar, one day in the future, have similar results, could do something that could have profound impact. So really, Dr. Kumar, Professor Kumar, your results, your achievement is just really inspiring, setting up a very good examples for the generations of students to come. Congratulations, Professor Kumar, well-deserved award.
Hi, I'm Venkat Venkatesan. I'm a member of technical staff in the Radio Systems Research Lab here at Bell Labs. I currently work on 6G physical layer research. I'm honored to be part of this ceremony, and I would like to congratulate Professor Kumar on his lifetime of accomplishments and this being the recipient of the Alexander Graham Bell Award for this year.
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Kumar, you've heard everybody gushing over the students, the world that you've made of impact. For those of you that are out there, Dr. Kumar's contributions are for seminal contributions of modeling, analysis, and design of wireless networks. Dr. Kumar, you have to tell us from the beginning what inspired you and how did you even come up with some of these theories? You made a joke previously in our conversation about a lot of folks just worry about theory, but you've taken that theory and you've made it real and impacted the world. So take us through your journey.
To be honest, everything was just serendipitous. We wanted to look at wireless networks, but we didn't know what wireless network to analyze. Is it this or this or that? So we said, okay, let's look at a large number. And I'd been working on queuing networks, manufacturing systems, etc., where there were large numbers of machines. I was looking at semiconductor fabs. There's a huge number of processing machines and so on. So the natural inclination was to say, hey, what can we say about a wireless network with a large number of nodes? And this was, of course, Piyush Gupta's thesis. And we actually wanted to say something better than what we actually said. We put some assumptions on the model of interference and so on, but we're not happy with that. We wanted to say it without those assumptions, and we couldn't. Spend a lot of time, and then finally gave up and said, okay, yeah, that's okay. Let's just publish what we have. So that's how it is. And we never thought that we would get that much interest. I remember at that time there was also a group on mayonnaise. I don't know which those days social media website, not website or group it was, and people were all trying to build mayonnaise, and most of the focus was on developing routing algorithms, as I remember, dynamic source routing or DSDB or AODB and so on. So there was a lot of interest, and probably just fed into that interest, but I'm just honestly completely surprised. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to go back even further before you were Dr. Kumar and before these papers. What even got you interested in wireless technology? What even motivated you to go into this field as an engineer? What kind of things inspired you when you were just a student?
So I've always believed that you should kind of look at problems which are areas which are rich in formulation. So, I always felt like I was in the fringes of research, so I should try to move to the center of gravity. So it's been a lifelong attempt to kind of chase what is interesting. So I remember I worked on, when I did my PhD thesis, it was on martingale approach to stochastic control. And honestly, it was absolutely terrible work. Yeah, I'm surprised I graduated. And of course, nobody is willing to give jobs for people doing martingale approach to stochastic control. But luckily, I got only one offer, and that was the Department of Mathematics at UMBC. Anyway, so and then I started working on adaptive. I did some stuff on game theory, but then I felt that was also the fringes. So I started working on adaptive control because I thought that would be more topical and so on. And then from there, I was visiting Sanjay Metter at MIT, and he said, hey, these guys are doing some interesting work on manufacturing systems. So can you look at it? So that's what I did. And I was also interested in queuing networks, which was also of interest in those days. So kind of I just drifted into wireless networks because it was a very rich area. There were a lot of, there's modeling richness. Everything had not been crystallized, written in stone, so that's what made it interesting.
Wonderful. Yeah. And have you, when you communicate with your students, do they understand that the professor before them has made these seminal contributions that have affected their ability to communicate, use wireless technology, and that if without it, they wouldn't be able to do the things that they do that they actually take for granted today?
No, actually, I don't teach any course in wireless or anything, not since I came to Texas A&M, and even then only once or twice I taught wireless networks. So I have not taught those things. I'm teaching more courses on machine learning and optimization, and I was stochastic systems and so on. Yeah.
So you've kept up with AI and all these emerging fields. So that's something else I think our young people need to hear is just because you came up with something seminal, it looks like you're never stop learning. You keep going, you keep moving, you keep solving problems. And AI and machine learning, I think that is, the wave of the future. So are you also looking towards the future of like what the greatest challenges are?
So as we're just having a chat just before this, and Iraj Sani was mentioning that the field of machine learning needs some clarity in terms of bounds and some hard results, some calibration and so on. And that's absolutely true. And I started looking at the neural networks when it was in its second phase. Neural networks is in its third phase. The first phase was Rosenblatt and then Minsky and Papert, perceptron. Then the second phase was when backpropagation was developed, and people were interested in training that and so on. So that's the time that I got into neural networks, and I read, in those days we used to have papers in steel cabinets, right? Filing cabinets. Now we don't. So I remember I had a whole 2 or 3 big drawers of filing cabinets just with neural networks papers, and I read all of them, and I couldn't publish a single paper. I couldn't think of what to do. Okay, so I just taught a course, maybe once or twice, and then that was it. And but I'm amazed that the field, something that I had given up on, there were others who persisted with it, and deep neural networks has made a lot of spectacular achievements, which I never anticipated at the time. So all credit goes to people who persisted with it and made it successful. Yeah.
Wonderful. Persistence. So we're going to take that. That's a good takeaway, persistence.
Sure.
I'd like to ask our esteemed guests from Nokia Bell Labs right now if they'd like to engage in the conversation. And we've heard lots about how Dr. Kumar has inspired you. Can you help us understand some of the impact it's made on your lives?
Yeah, I think maybe I can sort of comment on that particular question you had. How impactful for us it's been. I think as a mobile wireless company, I think it was really crucial for us to understand whether we continue with our existing approach of cellular networks with base stations and devices and multiple cells and intercell interference and things like that, versus also allowing devices to communicate with each other and moving information in a different way. And I would say that around the time that Professor was looking at this problem, there were quite a few people also looking at it and trying to understand, should there be a fundamental change in our architecture, how we build systems? And I would say that his results were really enlightening, and it really provided us with direction on what we should be doing in the future. And I would say that yes, I mean we understood the capacity results, and also we now actually have some level of device-to-device communications built into the standards. Not necessarily for long distance, as that's not the real purpose of it, but more for short-range local communications. So that's I think I think the results were right on time for us to absorb and define the path forward.
Mm-hmm. Others?
Yeah, I mentioned this concept of network information theory, and I think what we learned from Professor Kumar's work was how these systems simplify when you scale them. You typically think that as the number of elements in a system grows, complexity grows, and it becomes harder to handle. Physicists have, of course, in statistical mechanics have known this. But in engineering also, the scaling idea, if it is done right, it gives you insight about how the capacity, how the throughput, how the mechanisms in the system actually simplify. And that was very, very insightful, and the methodology is more widely applicable than the original paper. So I think that was a very fundamental contribution in our understanding of systems, including communication systems.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's also follow-up works derived from the original paper, including some from the students or even students of Professor Kumar's. And there, for example, working on different ways to collaborate among the nodes to the coordination, which it was left apart from the original paper. Like the original paper itself is already a lot of results, but at the end of the paper saying there is some additional constraints, coordinations might be possible. And that work was indeed followed by Professor Kumar's students and their students. So we indeed also read those papers and get inspired. And I think the scaling law analysis methodology even later adopted to analyze the large, say, antenna arrays. Like you have a large system with a lot of antenna elements, with a lot of users, and scaling of the frequency. So those kind of results, and I mean, it's not directly give us ways to implement the products, but tells us what's the possible direction for the overall system to evolve. I think that kind of inspiring insights for the system overall, is really useful for us as a network infrastructure vendors.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say the general approach of simplifying a problem to its essentials, and then taking in the specific case of the network asymptotics problem. Yeah, this idea that as Siraj was saying earlier, you get insights by letting the size of the system go to infinity. I think these are examples that have been inspiring to a lot of researchers, including me. I can't say I've lived up to your example, but I've certainly been inspired by it.
So I have a question maybe for Professor Kumar. As you were talking about the different directions that your career and your research took over the years, just wondering what kind of things make you excited or very satisfying to you? Is it like those problems when you see they have an impact? Is it kind of the curiosity, sort of being surprised or feeling like you solved something hard?
Yeah. So I used to say, I thought I was original, and I tell people that I've never done research in my life. I will always try to explain something to myself, understanding something. But then I found that David Blackwell had said it earlier. He said he never did a day's research in his life. He was just explaining things to himself. But he was a phenomenal contributor in so many areas. Yeah. Maybe I say one thing I was going to comment on. You should go back to those days of the early 2000s. So if you look at it historically, right? So from 1950 till about 2000, really the fields of communication, computation, control were born. They were all born around the same time. Shannon, Wiener, von Neumann,
Turing.
Turing was a little bit earlier than 1937. Yeah, Turing. All of them were at about the same time. Okay, all these fields, and in fact, they used to talk to each other in those days. Okay, Shannon was equally interested in computing. He says that's the big, great, exciting thing, and so on. As he was in communication, as he was also interested in biology, by the way. And but then so in the beginning, they came out of the same cauldron, but then they became individually stratified. And they kind of stopped talking to each other for a while. Maybe that was necessary because they needed to develop deeply on their own. And there's no point just talking across, they needed to deeply. But in any case, information theory following Shannon, also signal processing came a little bit later, Cooley, Tukey, and so on. And that was developed. And then control Kalman came around that same time. Control theory was developed, and of course, von Neumann and computation and so on. So all these fields got very well developed, perhaps in isolation for the next 50 years. And then technology also came along, right? People were imagining things that they couldn't implement in the 60s and 70s. But by 2000, semiconductors and we could actually get devices, right? So around that time, all these theories and availability of technology devices was an exciting day. So people started talking about large-scale sensor networks, right? People from California, Dave Collar, and so on. Large-scale sensor networks with lots of nodes strewn all over the landscape, monitoring the environment, or etc. And of course, then also we had developments, right? We had Wi-Fi about 1970s something. And then, we forget how recent all these things are. Mm-hmm. The computer is about 75 years old. Okay, and in between we've had Aloha was probably earlier than Wi-Fi and networking and so on, cell phones, etc. So all these things have happened in the last 50 years or so, right? But we already had Wi-Fi at that time, around 2000. So people were thinking of largeness, large numbers of wireless things, large sensor networks. People were thinking of scaling up these things and so on. So maybe retrospectively, that may have been part of the excitement in those days, technology, theory, scaling up devices, etc., etc. Yeah.
Awesome. I have to ask, you mentioned some folks along the way that inspired you. Who was your role model? Who really inspired you? If you look back now and say, we all look at you as a rock star. Who was your rock star back then?
Oh, I've always admired Praveen Varaya at Berkeley. Just a beautiful clarity of thought. Superb. Just simple, clean lines of research, and also very wide-ranging in many, many areas. So I've always looked up to him. And of course, there are other people I look up to, but never had the pleasure of meeting, like Shannon and so on, of course. But yeah. I think one of the things about all of us is, at least I'm saying academia, but all of us in this research area is the number of great people we cross paths with, right? All of us have met so many people who have shaped all the stuff that we see around us, right? So we're kind of very privileged in terms of our life's experiences and so on. Yeah. So many people I've met along the way. In fact, almost everybody I meet, I find something to admire. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, you are talking about the independent development of communications and computing and other. So, where do you see it going? I'm beginning to see that people are starting to work on the intersection of communications and computing, or control and communications. So, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, are we there yet? Or
that's what happened after these fields that kind of individually developed around, say, 1990 or so. People then started mixing and matching. Sensor networks is an outgrowth of that, for example, right? Sensing, computing, networking, etc. So once they became mature, people are mixing and matching now. I think that's still somewhat of a work in progress, I would say, right? Still somewhat of a work in progress. I don't know whether I see a single point of light or something. No. Yeah.
Yeah, I think still fundamental results are still maybe waiting to be discovered in those intersections.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. And for example, the excitement now is about machine learning. But if you go back, or for example, if you look at reinforcement learning, what people are looking at are very old problems that we looked at in the 70s, right? Adaptive control of Markov chains, and so on. The new elements that have come in are things like regret. We used to look at long-term average. Now it's regret. So even the seeds of present-day machine learning and reinforcement learning go way back about at least 50 years, right? On the reinforcement learning, even on the classification regression side, they also go way back. I mean, Vatnik's work on uniform convergence is very interesting. So Vatnik, when he came to visit me, he said something interesting. He said that in the Soviet Union, they used to write a paper every 5 or 10 years. And if you look at his own work, he wrote a paper. He was interested in pattern recognition, but he wrote a paper on uniform convergence in the law of large numbers. He already saw the connection way ahead. But he said when he came to the US, every time he passed by somebody's office, they were always writing a paper. And he was quite amazed. And if you follow his career, you'll see that how high a standard he had before he put pen to paper. But so all these fields have very age-old roots. But I think they're why have they flared up? I think it's because of the success in applications, right? At least on the neural network side, support vector machines, the applications success is what led them to think. Reinforcement learning, I still think, is work in progress. Okay, I mean, in terms of application success. Yeah.
So, Dr. Kumar, can you talk about some of the challenges you mentioned? Like you joked about your research when you were a student, but can you talk about some of the challenges? Because everybody, especially our young folks, they think it's a nice, beautiful trajectory, and we all know that's not true. But can you just talk about some of the challenges you had along the way?
Yeah, no, I think that a straight line trajectory is the most boring trajectory. I think the more nonlinear, winding it is, serendipitous it is, the more interesting it is. Actually, there are two things. If you're not, let's take a PhD student, right? I think nowadays there's too much of this going on where PhD students come in and their advisor gives them a problem to work on, And I think that actually kills a lot of the excitement of research. Solving a problem is not the problem. Formulating a problem, discovering that there is a problem, discovering that the problem doesn't have a solution, or there may be an opening, or that is 90% of research is what is the problem? Mm-hmm. How do you formulate it? What is the question to ask? Is this question impossible to answer, so we should just give it up and try something else? That's the wrestling that you have to do, and it is in that process that you become multidimensional. You explore many directions. You learn a lot of things. A lot of dead ends, also great learning experiences, and so on. So a straight line trajectory. The other thing about a straight line trajectory is that there's no flexibility and there's no opportunism. So if you're flexible and you see an opportunity, you'll drop this and take up that. So I think there's a lot to be said for really thinking about what problem you're working on, formulating, being flexible, etc. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I want to again congratulate you, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you.
We are truly honored to have you here, and we are truly honored to have our wonderful Nokia Bell Labs sponsors here as well. It has been truly an engaging conversation, and we are super excited to see you all at our VIX and honor ceremony. And for those young folks that are thinking of the future, I think we had some great takeaways from you, Dr. Kumar, that I will make sure that we tell our students that a straight path, linear path is boring. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
and innovation definitely comes from all those other experiences. So from all of us here at IEEE Awards, I want to thank you all for joining us. And again, congratulations to our 2022 IEEE Alexander Graham Bell Medal recipient, Dr. Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And before I go, I want to thank Bell Labs for supporting this area over decades and over several ownerships. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.